My hands were still gripping the steering wheel when I realized something was already wrong with the night. Christmas lights blinked across my mother's front porch, warm and inviting, but something inside me felt cold, like the air in my lungs had turned sharp. Mason sat quietly in the back seat, his small fingers tapping the zipper of his jacket. He was excited. He had talked about Grandma's Christmas dinner all week, but as we pulled into the driveway, I felt a strange heaviness settle over my shoulders. It was the same heaviness I'd felt every holiday for years, the one I always ignored. But tonight, for some reason, it didn't ignore me back. It pressed harder, whispering that I was walking both of us into something I wouldn't be able to undo. I opened the car door and the winter wind rushed in, biting the edges of my face. Mason hopped out and grabbed my hand immediately, like he always did when we visited my family. His small voice floated up into the cold air. "Do you think Aunt Brianna made the cookies again? The ones with the sprinkles?" "Maybe," I said, forcing a smile. "We'll see." But the heaviness didn't lift. It stayed. Inside the house, everything looked normal at first. Warm lights. Garland wrapped around the banister. The smell of turkey and cinnamon drifting through the air. People talk about moments that change your entire life, how they appear ordinary until they reveal their cruelty. This was one of those moments. I didn't know, stepping over that threshold, that by the end of the night I would walk away with my son's frozen hands in mine and a decision burning inside me that would cut my family from my life forever. "Taylor!" my mother called out from the kitchen. "You're late." I swallowed hard. "It's 6:10. Dinner was at 6:30. She didn't answer immediately, but when she appeared, wiping her hands on a towel, her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Well, everyone else is here." Everyone else. The words slid out like a small slap. Behind her, Brianna's 3 kids ran in circles, screaming with the wild confidence of children who had never been told no. Brianna leaned against the counter, wineglass in hand, hair perfectly blown out for the holiday. When she saw me, she lifted the glass slightly. "You made it," she said, like the idea truly surprised her. Mason stepped forward politely. "Hi, Aunt Brianna." She smiled down at him, the way someone might smile at a stranger's child in line at the store. Polite, but detached. "Hi, Mason." Her kids didn't even look at him. My mother ushered everyone toward the dining room. "Dinner's ready. Kids to the table." I guided Mason to a seat, but before he could sit, my mother placed a hand on my arm. "Not there." I frowned. "Why not?" "That's for family," she said, moving past me. I blinked, stunned. He is family. She didn't respond. Instead, she went to the kitchen, returned with 3 massive turkey legs, huge, golden brown, dripping with juices, and set one on each plate in front of Brianna's kids. There were bowls of mashed potatoes, green beans, warm rolls. Steam rose from every dish. Everything looked like a magazine spread. And then she turned back to me. "Put Mason in the hallway," she said casually, as if she were giving instructions about shoes or coats. "There's a stool. He can sit there." My heart dropped into my stomach. "What? Why?" Brianna didn't look up as she cut into her turkey. "Mom said there's no room at the table. You brought him too late." My mouth opened, then closed. My throat tightened. "He's a child. He can sit next to me." My mother's voice sharpened. "He is not sitting at this table." Mason tugged my sleeve gently. "It's okay, Mom. I can—" But my mother interrupted him with a coldness I had never heard directed at a child. "Stop fussing. He can eat the piece of bread I left on the plate in the hallway. It's fine." "The hallway?" I repeated, stunned. She waved her hand dismissively. "He's used to fewer things. He's fine with simple food." My breathing turned shaky. "Why would you say that?" Then she said the sentence that froze the room around me. "Taylor, don't make a scene. He's a bastard. Let's not pretend he belongs at the table." Time stopped. I swear it did. The lights seemed to hum louder. The clinking of utensils slowed. Brianna's kids looked up briefly, not understanding the word but sensing the tension. Brianna herself didn't flinch. She took a sip of wine. "Mom," she murmured as if mildly inconvenienced, "don't start." My ears rang. Mason stood perfectly still beside me, the way he did when he was trying not to cry. His chin quivered once, just once. He looked down at his shoes, shoulders folding in like he wanted to disappear. "Mason," my mother said sharply, "go sit on the stool." I looked at him. His tiny hands were shaking. "No," I said softly. My mother's brow lifted. "What?" I knelt down and zipped Mason's jacket, my fingers trembling. "Get your gloves, we're leaving." He slipped his hand into mine without a word. My mother scoffed. "Oh, stop being dramatic. Sit down, eat. He'll be fine." "No," I said again, louder this time. "We're leaving." "Taylor!" Brianna snapped. "Dinner just started." I turned toward the door. "Enjoy it." My mother followed us, voice rising. "Where do you think you're going? This is childish." But the cold wind outside felt cleaner than the air inside that house. Mason walked quickly, breath puffing in tiny white clouds. When we reached the car, he hesitated at his door. "Mom? Yes, baby? Did I do something wrong?" My throat tightened painfully. "No, you did nothing wrong." "Then why?" I crouched in front of him again. "It wasn't about you. It was about them, their choices, their cruelty. None of it is your fault." He swallowed hard. "Okay." We got in the car. I buckled his seatbelt with shaking hands. He stared out the window as the house faded behind us, lights glowing in the darkness. Neither of us spoke the entire drive home. When we walked inside our apartment, the warmth of the living room wrapped around us. Mason took off his coat and stood quietly for a moment, as if waiting for something. Permission, maybe, or reassurance. I walked into my small office, turned on my laptop, and opened the folder titled Estate Planning. Files loaded slowly. Wills, living trusts, beneficiary statements I hadn't touched in months. 6 months earlier, I calculated everything, $847,000 in assets. Savings, retirement funds, life insurance. Most of it was set to go to my mother and sister if anything ever happened to me. I stared at the numbers, at the names, at the small percentage allocated to Mason. The heaviness inside me hardened into something colder, sharper. I clicked edit. My hands didn't shake this time. Remove Linda Reed. Remove Brianna Knight. Add primary beneficiary, Mason Reed, 80%. Add secondary beneficiary, Children's Welfare Foundation, 20%. Reason for change? I typed the word slowly, deliberately. Discrimination. Emotional harm toward minor child. Repeated neglect. I saved the document. Then filed it officially through my attorney's digital portal. Then emailed my financial advisor. Then updated my insurance. Every click felt like a cut, like a thread snapping loose, one by one, until the entire fabric of my family unraveled. By the time Mason came to find me, holding a book and asking softly if I could read to him, everything had already changed. Everything. I pulled him into my lap, wrapping my arms around him as he leaned his small head against my chest. The heaviness was still there. But for the first time all night, it wasn't crushing me. It was becoming something else. Resolve. And I knew, right then, in the quiet glow of my office lamp, that this was only the beginning. The house was still dim when I woke, the pale winter light pushing through the blinds like it was afraid to enter. For a moment, I lay there listening. No footsteps, no voices, no brittle laughter echoing from last night. Just silence. A heavy, almost sacred silence that felt like the first clean breath after being underwater too long. I slipped out of bed and moved through the hallway, my hand grazing the wall as if to steady myself. The memory of Mason sitting alone in Brianna's hallway flickered in my mind, sharper than any nightmare. I forced it down. Today, I needed to be steady for him. When I reached the kitchen, the quiet felt even louder. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon from the candle I forgot to blow out yesterday. I set out a pan to make breakfast. Eggs, bacon, something warm. But before I cracked the first egg, I heard the soft shuffle of small feet. Mason appeared in the doorway, hair sticking up in flattened curls, clutching his faded dinosaur blanket. His eyes looked too big for his face this morning, still swollen from holding back tears. "Mom," he said quietly, "are we in trouble?" For a moment, I couldn't answer. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because his voice carried a fear a 7-year-old should never know. I knelt down in front of him and brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. "No, sweetheart," I said, touching his cheek. "We're not in trouble. We're just taking space from people who hurt us." He blinked, trying to decide if he could trust that answer. "Are we going back?" "No," I said firmly. "Not today. Not for a long time." He nodded slowly and climbed into his usual chair at the table, pulling the blanket around his shoulders like armor. I made breakfast. Fluffy scrambled eggs, toast, bacon slightly burnt the way he liked. He ate in small bites, quiet, thinking, each movement careful. My heart cracked a little more with every glance he gave me, like he was checking if he was allowed to feel safe. After breakfast, I handed him a warm mug of cocoa, and he wrapped his hands around it, exhaling softly into the steam. "Mom," he said suddenly, "why didn't they want me at the table?" His voice wasn't angry. It wasn't loud. That made it worse. My throat tightened. "Because they're wrong, Mason. Not you. They make bad choices. And last night? That was one of the worst." He stared into the mug, shoulders small beneath the blanket. "I thought maybe they didn't want me 'cause I didn't bring the right gift. The drawing, the one he made for Grandma, the one still folded in his coat pocket." I took a slow breath and steadied my voice. "You did nothing wrong. Nothing. Do you hear me?" He nodded, still looking down. I sat beside him and gently lifted his chin so he would look at me. "You belong at the table," I said. "Always." His lips trembled, and he leaned into me, letting his head rest on my shoulder. I held him there, rocking just slightly, the way I used to when he was smaller. When he went to watch cartoons for a bit, I walked quietly to my office. The laptop had been left open from last night, the estate planning folder still on the screen. Something about seeing it there, cold, factual, waiting, sent a sharp clarity through me. I sat down, fingers hovering above the keyboard, not quite ready to dive back into the world of beneficiary forms, but knowing I would soon. Before I could decide what to do, a soft knock came from the office doorway. Mason stood there, holding a thin piece of paper. The Christmas drawing. "I was gonna give this to Grandma," he said. I opened my arms, and he walked over, placing the drawing in my hands. It was simple. Just 2 figures holding hands in front of a Christmas tree, drawn in the bold, uneven strokes of a child who still believed the world would be kind to him. "She didn't want it," he added, not angrily. "Just accepting." I didn't get to respond. He gently took the drawing back, folded it once, then again, then tore it down the middle. The sound of paper ripping felt louder than any scream. He dropped the pieces into the trash and walked away without a word. My hands shook, but I forced myself to stay calm. His hurt deserved a mother who could hold steady. I closed the laptop lid and followed him into the living room. "Hey," I said softly, "how would you feel about redoing your room?" He blinked up at me, confused. "Like, changing it? New paint, new posters, maybe a new bed if you want." A small spark lit his eyes, fragile but real. "Can I pick the color?" "Of course." He got up so quickly he knocked over his blanket. I helped him gather it while he ran to grab his shoes, talking fast for the first time in days. "Can it be dark blue? Like the sky at night? Or like space? I want stars too, glowy ones. Can I do that?" "Yes," I said, smiling despite the heaviness inside me. "You can choose anything you want." We drove to the hardware store, Mason bouncing slightly in his seat. The aisles were bright, almost too bright after the dimness of last night. He darted between color swatches, holding them up to the light before settling on a deep midnight blue. He pressed the sample card to his chest with a proud grin. "This," he said. "It feels like not cold." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Then it's perfect." When we got home, we changed into old clothes and covered the floor with plastic. Mason insisted on painting, even though he held the brush like it weighed 20 pounds. He made messy strokes, laughing when he accidentally smeared blue paint on his cheek. I let him be messy. I let him be free. I let him feel like the world didn't shrink him. We painted for hours. Music played softly in the background. Old holiday jazz, the good kind, the kind that didn't hurt to hear. By the time we finished 2 walls, the room felt transformed. Not perfect, not finished, but different. Warmer, safer. Mason stepped back and stared at it as though he were studying a masterpiece. "It looks like my sky." "It does," I said, brushing hair from his forehead. "I like it better than Grandma's house." He said it without hesitation, without fear. It was the first time I heard him compare the 2 homes out loud. As evening rolled in, he grew sleepy. I found him on the couch, curled up with his dinosaur blanket, paint still on his cheeks. I carried him to bed, tucking him beneath warm blankets. He didn't wake. When I returned to the living room, the house felt peaceful, quiet, and uncertain, all at once. I sat on the couch, letting the day catch up to me in slow waves. My phone sat on the coffee table, face down. I flipped it over. 16 missed calls, 12 from Mom, 3 from Brianna, 1 from Dad. Dozens of messages, some long, others clipped and angry. I didn't open a single one. But then the doorbell rang. Mason stirred in the hallway, so I moved quickly and checked the peephole. My mother stood on the porch wearing slippers and a coat thrown over a nightgown. In her hand, a bright red gift bag, unmistakably from the cheap holiday display at the drugstore. She looked annoyed, not apologetic. "Taylor," she said, knocking harder. "Open the door. This is ridiculous." I didn't move. I didn't blink. "I brought something for Mason," she insisted. "You made such a scene last night." No. She made the scene. She made the hurt. She knocked louder. "I know you're in there. You can't hide forever." Her voice rose shrill. "Your sister and I talked. You owe us an apology." Apology. The word felt like poison. I stood still until she sighed dramatically, set the bag on the doormat, and walked away through the snow. I waited a full minute before opening the door. The cold air rushed in and hit my lungs like ice water. Inside the bag were a hoodie 2 sizes too big, a cheap stuffed bear missing stitching on one ear, and a toy car still in its plastic shell. The receipt was crumpled at the bottom, time-stamped 8:19 a.m. Less than 20 minutes before she showed up. Panic shopping. Not love, not remorse, not family. I drove the bag straight to Goodwill while Mason slept. When I returned home, he was awake, sitting on the couch under his blanket. He looked up at me, eyes curious but wary. "Was that Grandma at the door?" "Yeah." "What did she want?" "To give you presents." "What did you do with them?" I sat beside him, brushing dust from his hair. "I donated them." He nodded, not hurt, not surprised, just knowing. Kids understand truths we think we're hiding. 2 days later, I walked into his room and froze. It suddenly looked too small, too childish. The dinosaur wallpaper, once cute, now felt like a memory from a life before last night. The tiny bed, the old bookshelf, the faded posters, they all felt like pieces of a childhood that needed shelter. "Hey, buddy," I said softly, "ready to finish the room today?" He looked up, eyes bright. "Can we paint the ceiling too?" "Yes," I said. "Anything you want." We spent the next hours covering the ceiling in glow-in-the-dark stars. Mason insisted on placing each one carefully, saying their names as if he were discovering new galaxies. By dinner, the room glowed softly like a tiny universe. Later that night, as he slept, I sat in the doorway and watched the stars pulse gently above him. He looked safe. He looked loved. And for the first time since Christmas Eve, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, We were going to be okay. In the days that followed, messages from my family grew more frantic. Brianna sent an email demanding explanations. Mom left voicemails insisting Mason needed family stability. Dad texted asking if I could let things go and be reasonable. I answered none of them. Instead, I painted the last wall in Mason's room and bought new sheets. I made lunches he loved. I walked him to school. I held him longer when he hugged me goodbye. I worked late only after he fell asleep. Our world shrank to just 2 people, and somehow felt bigger, safer, more whole. One afternoon as he lay on the floor coloring, he looked up and said, "Mom?" "Yes, honey." "Do we have to see them again?" The crayon paused in his hand, his eyes filled with a fear no child should ever have to feel. "No," I said gently, "not for a while." He nodded slowly, then went back to coloring as if the answer had lifted some invisible weight from his shoulders. That night, I stepped into his room to check on him. He was asleep beneath the glowing stars, a tiny smile on his face. I closed the door quietly, walked back to my office, and opened the estate planning folder again, this time with a steady hand. Last night broke something. Today, something new began. Tomorrow, everything would change. Just past midnight, the house felt different. Hushed, watchful, as if the walls themselves were waiting to see what I would do next. I sat at my desk in the small pool of lamplight, staring at the open laptop. The estate planning folder glowed on the screen like a door I wasn't sure I was ready to walk through, but somehow couldn't look away from. The cursor blinked in the corner, steady and patient, as if reminding me the choice was mine and no one else's. My phone buzzed beside the keyboard. A text from Mom lit up the screen. "Are you coming back tomorrow? Bring Mason. He needs to learn respect." Respect. The word sliced through the quiet like glass. I inhaled slowly and placed the phone face down without replying. The cursor blinked again, waiting. I opened the document titled Beneficiary Summary. My own name sat at the top, and beneath it, neatly listed percentages of everything I'd worked for. Savings, investments, the small insurance policy I'd paid into every month since Mason was born. Primary beneficiary, Linda Reed. Secondary beneficiary, Brianna Knight. Minor child, Mason Reed. Only 15% allocated. I felt something tighten in my chest, a slow, deliberate squeeze. I scrolled through the document, remembering the day I'd first created it. I was 28, exhausted, juggling diapers and night shifts and bills, and my mother had told me she'd handle everything, if anything ever happened to me. Back then, I believed her. Back then, I still thought family protected you. The ache rose like a tide. I forced myself back to the present, fingers hovering above the keys. Before I could begin changing anything, a soft sound came from the hall. I turned as Mason appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eye with a fist. "Mom?" he whispered. "Why are you awake?" I closed my laptop halfway. "Couldn't sleep, sweetheart. Did I wake you?" He shook his head, the oversized pajama shirt slipping off one shoulder. "I had a weird dream. Can I sit with you?" "Of course," I said. He climbed into my lap, laying his head against my chest. I wrapped my arms around him, feeling the warmth of his small body, the softness of his breath. We sat there for a long moment. "Did they hate me?" he asked suddenly, voice small. My breath caught. "No, honey, they don't hate you. They just make bad choices. Very bad ones." He nodded slowly, as if filing that away somewhere deep. Then he lifted his head. "Mom, if you paint over bad things on a wall, does it make them disappear?" I swallowed hard. "Sometimes," I said. "It can help." He seemed to accept that. He slid off my lap and padded back toward his room. But before he turned the corner, he said quietly, "I like our room better. It feels warm." When he was gone, I opened the laptop again, full screen this time. My hand no longer shook. I deleted my mother's name, then my sister's. In their place I typed, primary beneficiary Mason Reed, 80% secondary beneficiary, National Children's Foundation, 20%. The system prompted, reason for major beneficiary change? I typed slowly, deliberately, emotional neglect, child-targeted discrimination, unsafe environment. The cursor blinked again, my finger hovered above the trackpad. This was the moment, no going back after this. I pressed save. A pop-up window appeared. Are you sure? This action cannot be reversed without attorney approval. Yes, I whispered, clicking confirm. I sat back, exhaling deeply. The quiet in the room shifted, like the air felt lighter. A sharp knock of adrenaline ran through me, fear mixed with relief. It felt like stepping out of a burning house barefoot, trembling but alive. My phone buzzed again. I reached for it reluctantly, expecting another lecture from my mother. But it wasn't her. It was my financial advisor, replying to the voicemail I'd left earlier. Call me tomorrow and we'll finalize all updates. I set the phone aside and leaned back, closing my eyes for a second. But the peace didn't last long. My phone vibrated again, harder this time. Dad calling. I stared at his name for 4 rings before answering. Hello? He didn't say Merry Christmas. He didn't ask how Mason was. Just launched right in. Listen, my car's transmission is shot. Repair shop wants $5,200. Can you spot me? I closed my eyes. No. Silence. What do you mean no? I mean no, I said, my voice steady. I'm not lending more money. But I need my car, he snapped. This is because of tonight, isn't it? You're being dramatic. I'm done funding people who forget my son exists, I said. He scoffed. Kids forget presents in a week, Taylor. Stop being emotional. I hung up mid-sentence. The texts began almost immediately. Mom, Brianna, Dad, all pouring in, each angrier than the last. I placed the phone on the counter, screen down, and went to check on Mason. He was asleep again, curled beneath the new blue comforter, stars glowing faintly above him. I brushed hair from his forehead, feeling something inside me settle. A vow, heavy and sharp. Never again. The next morning, I woke to the soft glow of sunlight stretching across my bedroom floor. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the instant rush of dread. I dressed quietly, made coffee, and sat at the table with my laptop. The screen displayed a list of every financial account I needed to update. Life insurance, retirement funds, savings. My phone buzzed. Mom, you should be ashamed. Brianna, you owe us an explanation. Dad, call me now. I ignored them. Instead, I called my financial advisor. He picked up with a warm voice. Taylor, Merry Christmas. What can I do for you? I need to update all my beneficiaries, I said. All accounts. All? He repeated. That's a major change. Can I ask what prompted it? No, I said gently. It's personal. He nodded in understanding. Then let's get to work. For the next 20 minutes, we went through every account one by one. When we finished, I signed the digital forms. Everything has been updated, he said. Mason is now your sole primary beneficiary. Thank you, I whispered. After hanging up, I closed the laptop and leaned back, staring at the ceiling as though it might give me answers. Instead, the quiet pressed in around me like a warm blanket. I didn't get long to enjoy it. My phone erupted with buzzing. Call after call, vibrating across the table like it wanted to throw itself at the floor. I didn't bother checking. I knew exactly who it was. By evening, there were 39 missed calls. I made dinner for Mason, pasta with homemade sauce, and he ate with appetite again, chatting about how the paint in his room looked bluer in the morning light. His laughter washed over me like a balm. After dinner, he curled on the couch with his dinosaur blanket while I cleaned up. Later, when I tucked him into bed, he whispered, Mom? Yes, baby? We're okay now, right? I brushed his cheek. Yes, we're okay. He nodded, laid his head down, and drifted off with a soft sigh. When his door clicked shut behind me, I returned to my office, pulled up all my documents again, and let the weight of every choice settle over me. I didn't know what my family would do next, but I knew what I had to do. Protect him. Always. And tonight, for the first time, it felt like I finally had the strength to do exactly that. Morning settled over the house like a soft blanket, pale light pushing through the curtains in quiet beams. I lay awake before my alarm, listening to the new kind of silence that had begun filling our home. A silence without tension, without waiting for the next demand, without any voice telling my son he didn't belong. For the first time in a long time, the quiet felt like something I could breathe in, something gentle. I slid out of bed and moved into the hallway, the floor cool beneath my feet. Mason's door was slightly ajar, a sliver of golden light spilling from the nightlight shaped like a tiny moon. I peeked inside. He was still asleep, curled on his side, hugging his dinosaur plush the way he used to when he was younger. His room, half painted in the deep midnight blue he'd chosen, gave the space a warmth it had never had before. The glow-in-the-dark stars we'd begun sticking to the ceiling shimmered faintly in the dimness. I whispered a silent promise to him, one I'd made every night since Christmas Eve. "You're safe here." I went to the kitchen and began cracking eggs for breakfast. The skillet hissed softly, filling the room with the smell of butter and warmth. The scent drifted through the hall, and only then did I hear the soft shuffle of feet. Mason appeared in the doorway, rubbing one eye with the back of his hand. "Morning, Mom?" "Morning, sweetheart," I said, smiling as he climbed onto his usual stool. He sat quietly for a moment, watching me flip the eggs. When I placed his plate in front of him, scrambled eggs, toast with a little jam and sliced strawberries, he picked up his fork, then set it down again. "Mom," he whispered, "are we in trouble?" The question, innocent and scared, hit harder than anything my family had said. I knelt down in front of him. "No, baby, we're not in trouble at all. We're safe here. Just you and me." He nodded, though his eyebrows pulled together like he was trying to solve a puzzle too big for him. "Grandma said I wasn't supposed to sit at the table. Did I break a rule?" My chest tightened. "No." "She was wrong. You didn't break any rule." He looked at me, really looked, searching for any hint of doubt. When he found none, he let out a long, soft breath and finally began to eat. Every few bites, he glanced up, as if checking whether he was allowed to enjoy breakfast. When he finished, I handed him a warm cup of cocoa. He wrapped his hands around it and took a careful sip. Then came the question that shattered the morning. "Mom, if I'm not part of Grandma's family, am I still part of yours?" I froze for a heartbeat, feeling something deep inside me twist sharply. I cupped his face gently. "You are my family. You're the best part of my family. And nothing they say will ever change that." He pressed his forehead lightly against mine. "Okay," he whispered. He went to watch cartoons while I cleaned up. But halfway through rinsing the dishes, I saw him quietly drop something into the trash. I checked once he walked away. It was the dry piece of bread from Christmas Eve, still in the napkin he'd folded it in. He didn't say anything about it. He didn't have to. Later that morning, a loud rumble came from outside, delivery truck tires grinding through icy slush. I glanced through the window just as the mail truck stopped at the curb. Mason was busy building a Lego spaceship in the living room, so I slipped on my slippers and stepped out onto the porch. The mail carrier handed me a stack of envelopes. "Looks like you've got a lot today," he said with a sympathetic smile. "Holiday leftovers, I guess." Maybe, I thought, or maybe the beginning of something worse. Inside, the envelopes spilled across the kitchen table. Half were bills. The other half were from my mother and Brianna. I opened the first one with trembling fingers. "You exaggerated what happened. You embarrassed all of us. You owe this family an apology for storming out." My throat tightened. I opened the next. "Brianna's children were upset after what you did. We gave your son food. You shouldn't act like a victim." My hands began to shake. I opened a third envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with one line: "Fix your will, and then we'll talk." I almost laughed from the absurdity, but the laugh died in my chest. Their audacity wasn't funny, it was dangerous. Before I could process it, my phone buzzed. Mason looked up from his Lego spaceship. "Mom, someone's calling again." I silenced it and forced a smile. "Don't worry about it, sweetheart." But the calls didn't stop. They came like waves, relentless, angry, demanding. "Mom, you embarrassed me last night." "Brianna, you ruined Christmas for my kids." "Dad, call me, don't play games, I need the money." Their voices crashed through the quiet, turning the house into a battlefield of unanswered demands. When the phone finally stopped ringing long enough for me to breathe, I spotted Mason standing in the hallway. His chin quivered slightly and his fingers twisted together. "Why are they mad?" he whispered. "Did we do something wrong?" "No," I said, pulling him into my arms. "We didn't do anything wrong. They're just upset because they don't understand." "Understand what?" "That their choices have consequences." He tucked himself deeper into my embrace. "I don't want to see them again." "You won't have to," I promised. But a small voice inside me whispered the truth. I wasn't sure we were done with them. Around lunchtime, there was a knock on the front door. Mason jumped, startled. I put a hand on his shoulder. "Stay here, okay?" Through the peephole, I saw a neighbor, Mrs. Holmes, holding a small tin of cookies. When I opened the door, she offered them with a warm smile. "Just checking in," she said. I saw someone shouting on your porch yesterday morning." Heat crept up my neck. "I'm sorry you had to hear that." She shook her head. "Don't apologize. Just wanted you to know. I'm around if you need anything." I took the cookies gratefully. "Thank you." As she walked away, I felt a small surge of relief. Not everyone would believe the stories my family would spread. Some people saw the truth. When I returned inside, Mason looked up. "Who was it?" "Just Mrs. Holmes. She brought cookies." "Oh," he hesitated. "Is she mad at us too?" "No," I said softly. "Not everyone is like them." That afternoon, as snow began to fall outside, I decided to give Mason's room a little more life. "You want to finish painting today?" I asked. His face lit up again. "Yes." We put on our old shirts, spread the plastic across the floor, and dipped our brushes into the midnight blue paint. Mason hummed a small tune as he worked, and every time he made a messy stroke, he giggled and said, "Oops," then kept going. His laughter filled the room like sunlight. I didn't realize how much I'd missed that sound. Hours passed, the walls transforming into a cozy landscape of deep blue. When the last stroke was done, Mason stepped back, hands on his hips like a tiny artist. "It looks really good," he said proudly. "It does." He reached for the packet of glow-in-the-dark stars. "Can we put some up now?" "We can put all of them up," I said. As dusk settled outside, the two of us stood on his bed, arranging stars across the ceiling. Some were crooked, some clustered together, some fell down immediately, making Mason laugh every time. When we finished and turned off the lights, the stars glowed softly above us. Mason stared up in awe. "It looks like real space." "It does," I agreed. A quiet fell over the room, a peaceful, warm quiet that didn't exist before last night. Then his voice came gently. "Mom, I like our home better than Grandma's." I didn't ask him why. I didn't need to. Later, after dinner, after cartoons, after bath time, and after Mason finally drifted into sleep, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. The glow of his newly painted room cast faint blue light down the hallway. I looked at the stack of letters again. Then the phone, still buzzing with messages I refused to read. I knew in my bones we weren't finished with this fight. But I also knew something else, something stronger, something calmer. I wasn't the same woman who walked into my mother's house on Christmas Eve. I wasn't the woman who let herself shrink to keep the peace. I wasn't the woman who swallowed hurt so others could stay comfortable. Tonight, the house was warm, safe, ours. Tonight, I was a different kind of mother. The kind who would burn every bridge necessary to protect her child. The kind who would not let anyone push him into a hallway ever again. I stood from the table, walked to my office, and opened the laptop once more. Tomorrow, I would begin documenting everything. Tomorrow, I would fight back. Sunday morning came with a soft gray light drifting through the curtains, the kind of winter light that makes everything feel quiet and suspended. I woke before Mason, stretching beneath the warm blankets, listening for any sign of movement from his room. Instead, I heard only the steady hum of the heater and the faint whisper of wind brushing against the windows. It felt like the world outside was distant, muffled, unable to reach us for a moment. I got up, wrapped myself in a sweater, and padded to the kitchen. I cracked eggs into a bowl, whisking slowly, trying to let my mind settle. Today, I wanted calm. Today, I wanted to rebuild something gentle for Mason, something stable, something that told his small heart, "You are safe here." The smell of sizzling butter filled the room. I flipped the pancakes just as small footsteps shuffled down the hall. Mason peeked around the corner, hair messy, eyes still sleepy. "Morning," he whispered, clutching his superhero blanket. "Morning, buddy," I said. "Hungry?" He nodded and climbed onto his chair, pulling the blanket around his shoulders. I placed a plate in front of him. 3 pancakes shaped like stars, because he'd told me once that food tastes better when it looks fun. He smiled a little and began cutting them carefully. Halfway through breakfast, he paused. "Mom," he said quietly, "do we have to go anywhere today?" "No," I answered. "We stay home, just us." He exhaled in relief so visible it broke something inside me. "Good," he whispered. "I don't want to see anyone." A wave of protectiveness washed over me so strong I had to grip the counter to steady myself. I moved to sit beside him, brushing my fingers over his knuckles. "You don't have to," I said. "We decide who gets to be in our life, not them." After breakfast, I brought up the idea of finishing his room. His eyes lit instantly, bright and hopeful. "Really?" he asked. "Really. Let's make it yours." He scrambled off the chair, blanket trailing behind him like a cape, and ran to his room to find the paint swatches we'd bought. When I walked in, he was holding the midnight blue sample card against the wall, squinting like a tiny interior designer. "This one," he declared, tapping it decisively. "It looks like space." "Then space it is," I said. We moved furniture away from the walls and laid out the drop cloths. Mason helped pour the paint into the tray, giggling when he accidentally splattered a small dot on his sock. "Oops," he said. "It looks like a planet." "Then keep it," I smiled. We painted together for hours. His strokes were clumsy and joyful. Mine were more careful, but I let him lead. The music played softly on the speaker, just instrumental, warm, safe. Every few minutes Mason would giggle or hum or make a comment about how this wall feels like a night sky, or maybe aliens can see this color from space. At one point he looked at me and asked, "If we paint over the old things, do they disappear forever?" His voice was soft, hesitant, carrying meanings beyond paint. I set my brush down. "Sometimes," I said gently, "sometimes painting over things helps you remember new ones instead." He nodded slowly. "I like new things better." Later, as the afternoon light shifted toward gold, someone knocked on the front door. Mason froze, shoulders tensing. I went to check the peephole. Aunt Carol. I hadn't expected her. She stood on the porch holding a tin of cookies, bundled in a thick winter coat, looking anxious but sincere. I hesitated for a second before opening the door just enough to speak. "Hi," I said cautiously. "Hey," she replied with a soft smile. "I brought these for Mason, and to check on you." I blinked. "You heard." "Everyone heard," she said. "Your mom and Brianna are telling people you overreacted. But I know them. I know how they can be." Emotion crept up my throat, thick and unexpected. "Thank you for coming," She handed me the tin. "I didn't want you to feel alone in this." Before I could respond, Mason peeked from behind my leg, unsure. When he saw it was Carol, his muscles relaxed. She'd always been kind to him, one of the few family members who treated him like he belonged. "Hi, sweetheart," Carol said softly. "I brought you cookies." Mason stepped forward shyly. "Thank you." She crouched to his eye level. "I'm sorry about what happened." He looked down at his socks. "It's okay." But it wasn't okay, and we all knew it. Carol stood and took a breath. "Taylor, there's something else." My stomach tightened. "What?" She glanced around nervously before leaning in. "Your mom and Brianna, they're telling a different version of what happened at Christmas. They're saying you caused a scene, that Mason refused to sit at the table. Of course they were. Reinventing themselves as victims was their specialty." Carol continued, "I overheard Brianna saying they're going to talk to a lawyer." My heart dropped. "A lawyer?" She nodded. She said, "She can't cut us out like that." I closed my eyes, the weight of those words pressing heavily on my ribcage. "Thank you for telling me." "I'll always try to be honest with you," she whispered. "And with Mason." After she left, I walked back to Mason's room and found him dipping his brush into the paint tray with intense concentration. His small face still carried the softness of childhood, but now it held something else, a quiet dignity he should never have needed to grow so young. I picked up my own brush. "Ready to finish the galaxy?" "Yes," he said, bursting into excitement again. We painted until our arms were tired and our shirts were stained with specks of blue. When we were done with the walls, we moved on to the stars for the ceiling. Mason insisted on placing each one with the precision of a scientist. "This constellation is ours," he said proudly, pointing at a cluster of glow stars. "It's me and you." Later, after dinner, Mason finished coloring a superhero drawing at the dining table. I was rinsing plates when he said, "Mom, what if they come here and try to make me go somewhere?" I dried my hands quickly and knelt beside him. "They won't. I won't let them." "Promise?" "Promise." He leaned into me, small and trusting. It made my chest ache with a tenderness that was almost painful. When he went to sleep, I returned to the kitchen table and pulled out my laptop. I created a new folder on the desktop titled Evidence. Inside it, I saved everything I could think of: screenshots, text messages, voicemails, photos from Christmas Eve, recordings from the doorbell camera, screenshots of Brianna's posts, emails from Mom, old memories I'd tried to bury, and the video of Mason sitting in the hallway. I clicked the video open, unable to stop myself. There he was, my son, sitting cross-legged on cold tile, shoulders hunched, cheeks flushed from embarrassment and cold. His small hands were wrapped around the stale piece of bread. The hallway was dim, littered with boots and coats, and above him the muffled sound of laughter spilled from the dining room. Then came the faint voice. "He's not one of us. The bastard can sit out there." My entire body went rigid. A chill rolled over my skin. I closed the laptop gently, trying to breathe. I walked to Mason's room once more before bed. He was asleep beneath the glowing ceiling, the stars flickering like tiny beacons in the dark. I brushed his hair from his forehead and whispered, "You'll never sit alone again. Not as long as I'm breathing." The house was quiet when I stepped back into the hall, the kind of quiet that comes after a storm, soft, fragile, waiting. I turned off the lights one by one, moving through the house with a new resolve forming inside me. Stronger than fear, stronger than grief. Tonight I made a silent vow. I would not let them rewrite what happened. I would not let them harm him again. I would not let them control our story. Whatever was coming, lawsuits, arguments, guilt trips, manipulation, none of it would make me undo the choice I made. I walked into my office, opened the laptop one more time, and added a new document titled, "For Attorney Harper, Full Timeline." Then I began typing. This all started on Christmas Eve. The morning air felt sharper than usual, crisp enough to sting my cheeks when I stepped outside to warm up the car. The sky was cloudy, the kind of heavy gray that hinted at snow later in the day. When I walked back inside, Mason was sitting on the couch tying his shoes, his backpack slung over one shoulder. He looked up at me, eyes wide in that way he had when he was trying to be brave about something he didn't want to talk about. "Ready for school?" I asked, brushing his hair gently. He hesitated before answering. "Mom, you won't let them take me, right?" The words hit like a punch to the stomach. I crouched down in front of him, placing a hand on his knee. "No one is taking you anywhere, ever." He searched my face, making sure he could trust that. When he finally nodded, I kissed his forehead and helped him zip up his jacket. We walked to the car together, his hand gripping mine a little tighter than usual. At school drop-off, he lingered, looking back at me again and again before walking through the doors. I watched until he disappeared inside, then exhaled slowly and returned to the car, fingers trembling slightly around the steering wheel. I didn't go home. Instead, I drove directly to Attorney Harper's office, my breath fogging inside the car as I rehearsed what I needed to say. By the time I walked into the lobby, anxiety buzzed under my skin like static. Harper's assistant smiled politely. "She's expecting you. Go right in." I knocked once and stepped inside. Harper was sitting behind a wide wooden desk, glasses perched on her nose, a file already open. She gestured to the chair across from her. "Rough morning?" she asked gently. "You could say that." I sat down, and the moment I did, everything came spilling out. The posts my family made, the lies they were spreading, the hints at legal action, the way Mason was reacting. Harper listened without interrupting, hands folded calmly on the desk. When I finished, she leaned back slightly. "Taylor, I'm going to be very honest with you." "I want honesty," I said. "Your mother and sister are not just upset. They're preparing a case. A weak one, but a case nonetheless." My heartbeat thudded in my ears. I knew it. They're aiming for one thing: grandparent visitation. Under Maryland law, it's not automatic. They have to prove harm to the child if they're denied access. But people like your mother, they know how to twist a narrative. I swallowed hard. What do I need to do? "Stay ahead of them," she said. "Document everything, every message, every incident, every pattern of behavior, and most importantly, do not engage with them emotionally. They will provoke you. They want a reaction they can use." I nodded slowly, absorbing each word like instructions in a survival manual. Harper opened a folder on her desk. "Start building a timeline. Include dates, times, descriptions of events. Gather photos, videos, text messages, voicemails. Get statements from anyone who has witnessed their behavior." I thought of Ms. Delgado at Mason's school. His teacher has seen the changes. She might help. That's excellent. Judges like neutral third-party validation. I exhaled shakily. "Okay, I can do that." Harper closed the folder. "You're doing the right thing. Your priority is Mason's emotional safety. Don't doubt that." I thanked her, left the office, and walked into the freezing air with renewed purpose. The cold didn't bother me as much anymore. It felt like clarity. When I got home, I set my laptop on the kitchen table, opened a fresh document, and titled it Family Patterns, Evidence. I pulled up screenshots I'd taken earlier in the week, Mom's messages, Brianna's posts, the voicemail from my dad. One by one, I uploaded them into the folder. Then I added descriptions. March 7th. Mom forgot Mason's birthday again. June 14th. Brianna told her kids not to play with him. He's not really family. September 2nd. Dad asked for money for the third time this year, never mentioned Mason. December 24th. Brianna serving turkey to her kids while giving Mason dry bread. The list grew and grew, each line a reminder of how long I had normalized their cruelty. I was typing furiously when I heard the notification ping. The group family chat had exploded again. I opened it with a sinking feeling. "Brianna, you overreacted." Mason wasn't excluded. Mom, you're lying about what happened. Dad, stop being dramatic. Then a message from an unknown number. Delete your changes to the will or we'll take action. My hands went cold. Before I could react, my phone buzzed again. A video notification, posted by Brianna on her social media. I tapped it, and my blood turned to ice. It was a video of her children crying on Christmas morning. Caption: when a mother destroys her family because she wants attention. They were rewriting the story everywhere. I grabbed my phone, took screenshots, saved copies of each post, and dropped them into the evidence folder. My pulse pounded, adrenaline rushing through my veins. When I finally shut the phone off, my head was spinning. The sound of a door opening jolted me. Mason stepped inside, cheeks flushed from the cold, clutching a folded piece of paper. "Mom," he said, "Ms. Delgado asked if you could meet with her after school sometime." "Did she say why?" I asked softly. He shrugged. "She said she wanted to make sure I'm okay." Something inside me softened. "We'll set that up," I said. He nodded and moved to the table to open his backpack. "Can I draw for a little bit?" "Of course." He sat quietly, crayons scattered around him, sketching small stars and spirals as if the universe inside his little mind was spilling onto paper. I watched him from the kitchen, feeling a mix of pride and sorrow tug at my heart. After a few minutes, he looked up at me. "Mom?" "Yes, sweetheart?" "Mrs. H asked why we don't go to Grandma's house anymore." My breath caught. "What did you tell her?" He hesitated, pressing the crayon tip into the paper. "I said, we don't go places where people forget I exist." A wave of emotion shot through me so fast I had to grip the counter for balance. I walked over, knelt beside him, and brushed a hand over his hair. "You never have to explain yourself to anyone," I said. "Not about this." He nodded, but I could see the shadow of confusion still lingering behind his eyes. That evening, Harper called to follow up. Her voice was calm, steady. "I reviewed the messages. They are trying to build a narrative. That means you have to build a stronger one." "What do I need?" "Everything," she said. "Documentation from the school, notes about Mason's emotional state, the video of Christmas Eve, any interaction you've had with your family since then. And Taylor, keep a daily log. Courts rely heavily on patterns." I opened a notebook and wrote the date at the top of the first page. January 2nd. Mason asked if we're in trouble. He's afraid we'll be forced back into the house where he was humiliated. Harper's voice softened. "This is how we protect him." I thanked her again and hung up. Just as I set the phone down, a knock sounded at the door. Mason looked up from his drawing, startled. I put a finger to my lips and went to the door quietly. Through the peephole I saw Aunt Carol again, her expression tense. I opened the door. "Carol, is everything okay?" She glanced behind her and lowered her voice. "Your mother talked to the neighbors." My jaw clenched. "About what?" "She told them you're having emotional issues, that Mason is scared of you, that you're isolating him." My stomach twisted. She's building her case. Carol nodded gravely. "You need to be careful. They're spreading lies fast." I thanked her again, feeling the ground shift beneath me as I closed the door. When I turned around, Mason stood with his sketchbook pressed to his chest. "Who was it?" he asked. "Aunt Carol." "Is she mad at us too?" "No," I said. "She cares." He nodded slowly and wandered back into his room. I followed him a moment later and found him removing stickers from his old wallpaper, peeling them off one by one as though trying to erase something. "Mom," he said softly, "it's quieter now." "It is," I said. "Do you like it quieter?" He considered this. "Yeah, it feels safe." My throat tightened. I lifted him up onto the bed, kissed the top of his head, and watched as he arranged his crayons neatly beside him. The stars on the ceiling glowed faintly in the dim light. After he fell asleep that night, I sat at the dining table with my laptop open and stacks of loose papers spread around me. I organized photos, printed screenshots, labeled folders, and added details to my timeline. It was exhausting, emotionally draining, and overwhelming, but it was necessary. At one point, I clicked on the hallway footage again. Mason, small and trembling, sitting alone with his cold piece of bread. The door to the dining room closed tightly, sealing him outside. My breath hitched, and for a moment, tears blurred the screen. Then I wiped them away and kept working. It was close to midnight when I finally closed the laptop. The house was dark and silent except for the gentle hum of the heater. I walked down the hallway to Mason's room, opened the door quietly, and watched his little chest rise and fall. The stars glowed softly above him, a tiny universe of safety we were building together. I whispered into the quiet, "They won't get to rewrite what happened, and they won't take anything from you ever again." Then I turned off the hallway light, letting the house fall into the deep, peaceful kind of silence that comes only after a storm begins to gather, and you finally decide to face it head on. The moment I woke, I knew something in the air had shifted. It wasn't loud or explosive, just a tension threading through the quiet house, an invisible weight pressing against my chest. The winter sky outside was still a pale blue-gray, the kind of color that made the world look colder than it already was. I stepped into the hallway and saw Mason sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, building a small tower out of dominoes. He looked up when he heard me. "Morning, Mom?" "Morning, sweetheart." I ruffled his hair, but even from that small touch, I could sense something in him. Something cautious. "You okay?" He shrugged. "Can we stay home again today, just us?" My heart pinched. Yes, just us. I made breakfast while he finished his little tower, but in the middle of cooking, my phone buzzed, then buzzed again, then again. I wiped my hands on a towel and picked it up. There were 67 notifications. At first, I thought maybe it was a glitch. Then I saw the group messages. Someone posted screenshots. Someone tagged me. Someone left voice notes. I opened the first one and felt my stomach drop. "Mom, some people think destroying a family makes them strong. Pray for Taylor." "Brianna, we did nothing but love Mason. She ripped him away from us." Then a public post from my mother, her profile picture replaced with a black ribbon as though someone had died. Caption: "When a daughter loses her way, the whole family hurts." Comments poured in beneath it from cousins, extended relatives, and people who never once asked about Mason. "You poor thing. She's always been dramatic. Kids need their grandparents. She should be ashamed." I stared at the screen, frozen. The story had been rewritten overnight. They were painting me as the villain, the unstable daughter, the hysterical mother. But I didn't move. Not yet. Footsteps shuffled behind me. Mason tugged lightly on my sleeve. "Mom, why are people online saying you're mean?" I turned immediately and put the phone face down. "You don't need to read any of that, okay? None of it is true." He swallowed and nodded. But I could see the confusion, the fear, the hurt. I bent down. "You know the truth. That's what matters." His lip trembled, but he didn't cry. "I like being with you more than anybody else." I hugged him until his breathing steadied. While he brushed his teeth, I reopened the messages, this time with steady hands. Every word would go into evidence, every accusation, every lie, every attempt to guilt or manipulate. I screenshotted everything. By the time Mason finished getting dressed, I had a folder filled with images, evidence of years of patterns. I didn't want it to exist, but it did, and now it would finally mean something. We spent the morning painting the last corner of his room. He hummed while he worked, tapping his brush against the wall with more enthusiasm than skill. His cheeks were dotted with tiny splashes of blue. At one point, he said, "Mom, I like the stars best. It makes me feel like I'm sleeping under the sky." "That's exactly the point," I smiled. He beamed and kept painting. But the piece didn't last long. The phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Ms. Delgado. "Hi, Taylor. Could we talk after school tomorrow? It's about Mason. Nothing bad, I promise. Just want to check on him. My throat tightened. Kids can carry more than we think. I texted her back immediately. Of course. When I set the phone down, I glanced toward the front window and froze. A car I recognized was slowly pulling up to the curb. My mother's car. My pulse quickened, and I felt a rush of heat climb my neck. I stepped toward the window and peeked through the blinds. She wasn't alone. Brianna was in the passenger seat. "What's wrong?" Mason whispered behind me. I turned, kneeling quickly so we were eye level. "Nothing you need to worry about. Why don't you go choose some posters for your room? Maybe space planets?" He nodded and hurried toward his room. Then the doorbell rang, sharp and insistent. I checked the peephole. My mother stood there in her long coat, arms crossed, looking expectant and furious all at once. I didn't open the door. She knocked again. "Taylor, open this door right now." I stayed still. "You're acting childish," she snapped. "We're here to talk." Another knock, harder this time. "You owe us an explanation." My jaw clenched. Then her voice dropped, low and venomous. "You think you can cut us out of your life? Out of Mason's? You can't. We have rights." I pressed record on the doorbell camera. "We know what you did," she continued. "We're not stupid." I waited. I did not engage. "We'll take legal action," she hissed. "You won't win this." When she finally stepped back from the door, Brianna leaned in close. "You're not fit to raise him alone," she said. "Everyone sees it. Everyone knows." They stood there a moment longer, whispering to each other, then walked back to the car. I didn't breathe until engine sounds faded down the street. When I turned away from the door, I saw Mason standing just outside his room, eyes wide, fingers curled into the hem of his shirt. I knelt again. "Sweetheart, why are you out here?" "I heard Grandma," he whispered. "Is she mad at you?" "She's confused," I said gently. "She doesn't understand we're making our own choices now." His lower lip trembled. "Is she gonna take me?" I pulled him against my chest, feeling his small body shaking. "No," I whispered fiercely. "No one is taking you. I won't ever let that happen." He clung to me, his heartbeat quick and scared. I kissed his hair and held him for a long time. Eventually, when his breathing settled, he whispered, "Can I help finish the ceiling stars?" "Yes," I said. "Let's make our galaxy." We spent the afternoon sticking stars onto the ceiling, Mason placing each one with careful precision. Every time he giggled, every time his face lit up at a new pattern, I felt a new resolve form inside me. He had been made small once. Never again. When the stars were done, we shut off the lights. The ceiling glowed like a quiet universe. Mason lay on the bed staring up at it, smiling softly. "It's like magic," he whispered. "It is." That evening, I made dinner while he worked on homework. He looked lighter, calmer, but there was still something fragile in the way his hands moved. While I was pulling pasta off the stove, my phone lit up. A number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Then it buzzed again. A text. "Consider this your formal warning. We will pursue visitation rights." My stomach dropped. I read the sender's name. My mother's attorney. I saved the message and exhaled slowly. Later, as Mason brushed his teeth, I stepped into my room and called Harper. She picked up immediately. "Taylor?" "They're escalating," I said quietly.